Welcome to the podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed. I'm the founder here at SRC Growth, a company that works with management consulting and boutique consulting firms from around the world to help them increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Hossein Kasmai. Hussein is an entrepreneur, public speaker, a business consultant to over 900 companies, is considered an expert in franchise industry. Mr. Kashmai is the founder and CEO of Franchise Creator, the world's leading franchise consulting firm. Many celebrities have even partnered with Hussein to start and grow their businesses worldwide. Hussein, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Saeed. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, no, so am I. And just having a caliber like yourself on the podcast and someone who's been able to reach so many different business owners and even working with celebrities is really exciting to be able to pick your brains, try and understand what you know, grab your insights, and then share it with as many people as we can in the audience. The best way to really start off, I feel, and this is, I guess, the way I like to start off is a little bit more about you. So, could you, for the audience and the listeners that may not know who Hussein Kasmai is, could you give me a brief background on your journey to where you are today and the current role you play in your business?
Sure. So my journey started obviously out of college. We all start off working for a company. That's how colleges are designed to get you a job. And I did. I'm an engineer. I graduated as an electronics and electrical engineer, and I worked for a company called Motorola, which back in the day was the Apple of today, where we developed the first cell phones and pagers and what have you. But that was really the end to my job career, if you will. And I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew that I wanted to be on my own so that I could remove this roof above my head, as far as growth roof is what I call it. So I could just, be able to flourish and make the sky the limit. Once the ceiling is gone, the sky is now the limit, right? So I got into the world of entrepreneurship and started a company that was a high-tech company, provided messaging to be superimposed over television sets in bars and restaurants, which was used for promotional reasons by the owners of those establishments. And I was able to grow. I did the whole, the engineering part of it, the sales part of it, all of it. And I was able to basically build a business from an idea. Now, I've been an idea guy all my life, and that's basically the base of my entrepreneurship, right? So that company grew, and within a year it got bought out. And then after that, I did some other work on a contractual basis for various government entities, and then I started another company. This one was basically children's identification. Here we basically provided IDs in schools and daycares for parents to have of their children in their pockets, in their cell phones, so in case their child goes missing, they have something to show the police. And that was very successful in the local market where I live. And of course, there's only, then I started thinking about scaling this business. How do I scale a business that involves children, right? I don't want to hire an employee across the country or in another city where I have no control of, that's going to be handling children in daycares and schools, right? No matter how much background check you do, there's always that first-time offenders that never come up in those background checks. So that's when I discovered the world of franchising, and I said, well, this one sounds good. Why? Because the person who's buying a franchise from you has a vested interest. They're investing their money and they have a vested interest in your business, right? Your business is their business. And for that reason, they care about it as much as you do. So that I franchised that business, and it grew to 175 franchises in 11 countries in a very short time before it was acquired in the early 2000s. And then after a short, brief, I should say, retirement period, I realized that I got a whole lot of fuel in my tank. And I came back to this world of franchising because it was a sweet world. And I started a company called Franchise Creator, which basically does exactly what I did for my business for other businesses. So if you have a small pizza shop or you have a restaurant or whatever you do, you come to us and we turn them into a franchise. And then once it is a franchise, we utilize the experience that we personally have from doing that for several other businesses, grow them nationwide and even in some cases worldwide. Franchise Creator today has franchised about 900 different businesses and has seen some of these businesses hit multi-million dollar valuation and in some cases even billion-dollar valuation, which all started from basically a location or two locations. That's where we are right now. There's a lot of other businesses that I have started on the side and have grown as well, but we don't want to make this podcast be about my resume. It'll last an hour.
Absolutely. I just loved hearing that. And I think just from that intro, you can really, and listeners there can really understand the caliber of guests we've got on today in the sense that you're a multi-exit founder and CEO, but you now, after doing what you did, you're helping others do the same thing, and you're found a winning formula and you're replicating it for others in the market. And so I guess my first question would be, with over 900 companies advised, what are the most common misconceptions about franchising you've encountered amongst business owners? Because I'm sure there's a whole host out there. Franchising isn't the way. Oh, it is the way. What should it be? What are those misconceptions, do you think?
So there's a whole lot of these, right? So first thing first is business owners think that franchising is such a big word for me. I'm just a pizza guy. I'm just a sub shop. I'm just a gym. I'm just, one-man show or two-man show, or franchising is for McDonald's and Subway and all of those guys, not realizing that every one of those guys started with a single location. Everybody crawls before they walk. Nobody comes out from the hospital just being born starts walking home, right? Everybody goes through the same journey, and businesses are the same way. You start the business with one location and then you make it two locations, three locations. Every location has to be scaled, and franchising fits the mold for businesses of every type, every kind, almost every kind, and every size, every revenue, and every part of the business journey they're in. It's the right time to franchise. It's never too early. It's never too late. A lot of people say, well, look, I've been in business for 3 months. How can I franchise a business? Well, the business that I just told you about myself that I did in schools and daycares was in business for less than 3 months when I franchised it. And I already told you the results of that. When you look at a business like Massage Envy, it was in business for even less than that when they franchised. When you look at a business like Subway, they were in business with 2 locations, both losing money when they franchised, and they built a $9 billion business out of it. When you look at a lot of these businesses that are huge now, McDonald's, you all have seen the movie. If not, you should go definitely watch the movie. And that movie tells you that they had a location, and that's the location they franchised, right? The McDonald's brothers. So everybody starts from the same thing. So the misconceptions are, Saeed, basically, I'm too small. Business is too young. My revenue isn't there yet. I don't have processes. Franchising is gonna destroy my brand. This is the best one. This is the one that really gets me going when I hear people saying, how in the world, I've worked 10 years to build this business. You really want me to give my recipes and my know-how and everything else to some person across the country who's gonna open a location and destroy my brand because they're not gonna operate it properly? And the answer to that question is, every big brand that you know today, 95% of them are franchises. In the food industry, which is a good example to talk about, in the consumer world is what I'm talking about. But in the restaurant industry, you name me top 10 brands that you recognize, and I guarantee you 9 are franchises. So franchising doesn't destroy brands, it actually makes brands, it builds brands, right? Because the whole thing is so regulated, Saeed, right? I mean, if you have a business and you open a second location, what's going to happen is you're going to have to hire an employee, because you can't be in 2 places at the same time. That employee doesn't care for your business, he's just an employee. And if he loses his job because he's on social media all day instead of talking to customers, what's going to happen? You're going to fire him and he gets another job just like it the next day. He doesn't care. So for that reason, The biggest misconception is people think opening locations on their own is going to preserve their brand when realizing that that's the worst way to open a business, because those people, because you can't run 5 locations at the same time, you have to put managers. Those guys don't care about your business. Where in franchising, the guy that's opening and running that location put his money, hard-earned money, behind the business, just like you did.
Yeah.
And for that reason, they care about it just like you do. And that's why these franchises succeed significantly more than company-owned locations.
No, I think you touched on some really interesting points there, and there's a lot to unpack. But I wanted to start off with the point you made there in terms of how franchises are, well, especially in the food and beverage industry, overly regulated, right? So restaurants and things like that. Being able to, I mean, everyone says starting a restaurant is you're killing yourself. Why would you do that? It makes a lot of sense when you do think about the franchises out there, why they've chosen that model, because it's so difficult to scale a normal chain of restaurants when you're adding employees here and there consistently throughout. I think another point that I wanted to talk about was in the UK, we're finding that more and more private equity firms are trying to franchise accounting firms. So it's not just in these areas where you see the Burger Kings and the McDonald's and things like that. It is small accounting firms that have a reputable brand that you can work with. I think is really interesting there, some of the points you made. In terms of then franchising in general, I guess the biggest point I wanted to make was, how is it that an owner who franchises their business out, what is their responsibility when they franchise out in terms of acquiring customers? Because someone's got to build that brand. Are they doing anything to build that brand, or is it a simple case of I have responsibility for my area, you have responsibility for your area, we build the brand together?
So, look, franchise is a franchise, but the success of each franchise depends on how involved the owners of this the CEO or the founder of the business is. Like, when you run a business, you mentioned an accounting firm, H&R Block, or any of these people that are franchises, right? So when you're running a location on your own and you're not a franchise, you're putting all your resources in that particular business. You're in the business of accounting, and that's what you do all day, all night. When you franchise this out, now you have 2 businesses. You have your accounting, where you are concentrating on, and then now you have a franchising business. The franchise business, which happens to be a separate entity, is completely independent, and it's in the business of selling franchises, expanding the brand, and servicing the franchisees to make sure they're successful, and providing support and training and everything else. Nothing to do with accounting. The word of accounting didn't even get mentioned in that second entity, right? It has nothing to do with that. So now you have to learn what franchising is all about, and hence the reason why people like myself are around to teach people what they need to do right and what they shouldn't do wrong in order to succeed, right? So that is precisely the game that we put out there for these guys, and all of it has to come from experience, right? So you franchise out, and then, working with a real consultant that has real world experience in the franchising, not because he read a book or, he took a 40-hour course or something like that. That's not what you want. You want, or has a fancy title. We don't want any of that. The first question you got to ask is, it's like asking a vegan chef to cook you a steak, right? He's never tasted the steak before, and you're asking him to cook you a steak. Well, it doesn't work. The first question I ask is, I'm going to ask, if you really believe in franchising and you have the experience, why haven't you done it for yourself, right? And that's where I would start. But at the end of the day, processes have to be put in place. You want franchises, Saeed. The difference between company-owned and franchise locations, growth, success, is that in a regular business, the growth goes from top to bottom. In other words, the more revenue the company has, the more it can provide, the more salaries and benefits and everything it can provide to its employees, and it can grow the business by hiring more employees. Employees have a higher chance of sustaining their jobs, and so forth and so on, and everybody succeeds. In the franchise world, it's bottom up, meaning that for a franchise system to succeed, franchisees have to do well. If you open 10 locations and 8 of them close because these franchisees are doing terrible, the whole system falls apart, right? So it's incredibly important to understand that in the franchise world, all of your resources and all of your energy as a franchisor has to be concentrated on your franchisee's success. If they succeed, you succeed. Yes, you're getting a royalty from their sales, and many franchisors say, look, I get royalty from their sales, not their profit. So I don't care if they're losing money. I'm making my money on royalties from the top anyway, top line anyway. But that's the wrong way to think, because that royalty, that gravy train is going to stop very quickly when this guy goes out of business. So you got to make sure that these franchisees are doing fantastic, and for that reason, the whole system is going to flourish.
I think that's a great point. It's long-term thinking, isn't it? You have to think long-term. You have to be helping the franchisees prop themselves up and actually be able to maneuver. But I think again, it's really interesting what you mentioned there about the franchise is it's a separate entity to everything else that is in the business, and it is building that brand. In terms of what you do when you're advising your clients on what to do or what not to do, what they should be worried about when they franchise, what they should be excited about, what is it that you advise? And you don't have to give all your secrets here today, but what can someone expect if they were to work with you?
Well, I just gave you a few examples of that, right? So this is what, when they work with a person like myself, they're getting real world knowledge. They're getting real world experience. They're getting, you ask the question of how in the world did you grow, a business from a concept in your head into reality. Then you franchise it and you grew it from one location into 175 locations, but not one country, but 11 countries in the world. Where the cultures are different, the systems are different, the regulations are different, and all of that, and be able to succeed. Well, there's a lot of work that goes there. There was no luck, or it was no, one thing that we did and the whole thing worked. There's a lot of learning that was done, right? So when you hire a person like myself, you're getting that experience. You're tapping into that experience. You're getting someone that's holding your hand. It's like learning. If I'm a first time, if you have a child and you want to teach him or her how to drive, do you prefer a world champion in NASCAR teaching him or her how to drive, or the guy that just is 19 years old and trying to pay for his first year of college? The guy has 4 years of experience or 3 years of experience of driving, and he's had 4 accidents so far, but you know what? He's got a license, so he can teach you how to drive. No, I want to learn from Mario Andretti, or I want to learn from Fittipaldi, or I want to learn from some of these successful cars. It's the same thing, right? So if you want to franchise your business, you got to go to someone. And it's not even franchising. Let's talk about scaling your business. Yeah. Look, one of the things that I say is that what I always say to people is, if you have a business and you have a location and you're running your business and you're doing well and you're not scaling it, you merely have a job. That's what that business is. It's a job. It's a job with a lot of stress, where you can replace it, go sell that business, go get a job somewhere, and have your 2 weeks vacation, because as a business owner, it's hard to have any vacations. Work your 9 hours or 8 hours a day, go home and be with your family. If you want to be an entrepreneur and you opened a business, you did it for a reason, and you did that to make significant money. You did it to remove the ceiling above your head so that the sky is the limit. Well, the sky is not the limit with a single location. So if you want to grow your business and make that money, you got to scale it. It's that simple. So now the question is, how do I scale my business? Every business is different. If you have a restaurant, scaling is different than if you have a medical practice. If you have a gym, the scaling is different than you have a home service business. So all of these have different strategies for them. But hiring someone like us, we put the strategies in place. Whatever your desire is. I want to grow into 50 locations in year 1. I want to grow into 10 locations. I want to grow into 30. Whatever it is, we put the proper processes and documentations in place. We pave the road so that you just get on it and go exactly where we tell you to go. That's how we operate.
I think that's a really great point, again, in the sense that having your hand held through a tough process is one of the best ways to do anything, especially when you're working with an expert, someone who knows what they're doing, that's walked your shoes, walked the path already, and has exited in a successful fashion. In terms of scaling, then, how? Let's say you were a, I don't know, a dentistry practice that you wanted to, or maybe that's a bad example. For example, do you have any examples of a business that you would demonstrate where you have helped them scale from one office, one location to 10 locations in the space of X number of years? What is it that, can you think of anything at the moment?
Of course, I could give you more. I can give you more brands and companies that than you can shake a stick on. I mean, there's so how much time do you have? But I'll give you a couple of examples, right? So we had a husband and wife team that had two or three locations in New York City of a waxing place, right? It's a sugaring, it's waxing, right? Body waxing. They came to us and they were very hesitant about franchising. They pulled all their rebuttals. Oh, but I have only three locations. Oh, I only been in business for less than a year. Oh, this is a family operation. Oh, I don't want somebody learning my techniques and doing it on their own and copying it. Oh, I don't want somebody opening this across the street and ruining my brand by not operating it properly. On and on and on and on and on, right? They finally franchised, and today, in probably 5 years, they've grown to 230 franchises. 230, that's huge. Now you've built a brand that everybody recognizes. We franchised restaurants that have grown to 30, 40 locations within their first 2 years. We franchised a business that's an oil change, like a quick lube type of an oil change. It's called SB Oil Change. This company came to us, they franchised, and they grew to just about 200 locations in about 3 years, and the company got bought out. They were acquired. We franchised businesses in pretty much every industry. We did a lawn care business that has grown to 150 locations. I can just give you again more and more examples, and all of these have happened between 3 to 5 years, 3 to 6 years. We're not talking about 20-year or 30-year projection. This is scaling your business, growing it, allows you to have a real retirement goal. A retirement that you can enjoy. People talk about their retirement. Oh, when I'm 65, I'm going to retire. Well, you retire, by then that engine is worn out, right? That engine is ready for a mechanic shop. It's just not, you're retired to do what? To put the car in the garage and just turn it off and go home? I mean, what is the definition of retirement? If you want to retire, a meaningful retirement where you have money and resources and still time on your horizon to be able to use that money, that's what I call retirement, right? So that's what scaling a business does. It allows you to gain enough cash. It's just a substantial amount of cash with an exit or something that you can actually reach the dreams you've always had.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. In terms of, and I was just thinking about some of the things you just mentioned there, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about the person that comes to you that may be in the first few months of starting their whatever brand that they've started. And you mentioned you could be 1 month into starting, you could be 1 year in, you could be 10 years in before you franchise, right? What is the journey a franchisor would need to do from start when they work with you? What kind of applications would they need to do? How much investment would they need to be putting into to be able to go, okay, I have a dream. I have a dream to remove the ceiling above my head, to be able to reach for the stars. So if I fall, I land on a cloud. Famous Kanye West quote there. But what is it that they need to do so that they can strive for their dreams and achieve that, even if they just started out or even if they're a year in?
So look, what they need to do, as far as you start off with the business itself has to be a desirable business, right? So you have to have good reviews. I always start with reviews, right? If you have customers that are coming back to you, that means they like what you got. Right? If you have customers and never come back, that means your product is no good. So you need to improve that. If you have customers that are leaving you horrible reviews one day after day, and your reviews are in 2.5 or something like that out of 5, I mean, I would say no to you and say, look, go fix your problems first before you bring your problems to somebody else. But if you have good reviews, you have good products are good, your sales are going up. Your sales are not doing this. Their sales are going up. Even if you're not completely profitable, but you're doing this. In other words, eventually you'll be profitable. These are all qualifications, right? So what you should do is first fix your business if it has a problem, right? And I just mentioned what those problems could be. But beyond that is you need to set aside some money to franchise your business, right? What is this money? Well, it depends, right? But this money, whatever it is, it could be a loan, right? It's less than 100 grand. It really is what you need to turn your business into a franchise and grow it. Now, that may be a lot of money, right? But when you think about it, is first of all you finance that, but more importantly, you have to think of it this way. In every business that you enter, in every venture that you enter, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is my ROI? What is my return on interest? Or how quickly do I get my money back? You're asking me to put 50 grand, 60 grand, 70 grand, 100 grand into this venture that we're going to do together. Well, okay, well, how soon do I get this back? And if it's anything less than, depending on what your appetite is, in the business world, if it's 3 years or less, it's a great investment. If it's 2 years or less, it's an amazing investment. If it's 1 year or less, it's like, what in the world? Where do I sign type of an investment? Right? So in the world of franchising, you have to think of it this way. Whatever you're spending to franchise your business and then using money to advertise and market this franchise so that people know this franchise exists and they call you and say, I'm interested to learn more. Whatever those numbers are, you have to think of it this way. With a single franchise you sell, you're going to receive a franchise fee from that buyer. And that franchise fee is typically around $40,000 to $50,000. So you literally are getting your money back. With a single franchise, maybe 2 franchises sold, you've got your money back. If you sit there and believe that you can sell 1 or 2 franchises in a short period of time, and I just said what, if it's a year or less, you have a where do I sign type of thing, 2 years. If you believe that you can sell a single franchise or 2 franchises in the first 1 or 2 years, then you shouldn't franchise your business because you're not a believer of your own concept. So that's the way I tell the people. I say, that's how easy it is. It's the most rewarding venture you can ever get into. Because when you start your business and you spend $300,000 or $400,000 to launch a restaurant, it's going to take 10 years to recoup that. It's going to take 15 years to recoup that. But in the world of franchising, if you franchise your business, you're probably going to recoup that investment in months, not even years, but in months. So that's why it's a no-brainer type of a decision.
No, it's a really interesting point you raised there, and it's definitely points that I've never really considered when thinking about franchises, because you see it consistently around you. You walk down, you see a chain. Oh, I've seen that before. They've expanded, and then you see some really new big brands that, like there's a Blank Street Coffee in the US. It started off in the US. They've expanded. The beautiful thing about it is there doesn't seem to be a quality issue, right? It's expanded across the pond, and yet you've got great coffee, a clear style, clear methodology, but it's competing with some of the biggest brands out there. And it's a coffee chain, right? Coffee's not like short of resource. So it makes me think about how big the opportunity is for businesses out there franchising. And obviously you have specifically franchised internationally, and you've helped celebrities with their franchising journey as well. How do you help franchisers navigate international expansion? Obviously there's things to think about, like different cultures, as you mentioned, regulatory environments and different markets. How do you help someone build up to that daunting aspect or thought of going, I'm going international, this is the opportunity, this is how we do it?
So the game has changed throughout the years. When I got into the world of franchising in the early 2000s, the game was very different. And the advice that I gave people back then was very different than the advice I give them today. The advice back then was, look, you grow your franchise like when you throw a stone into a lake or a pebble into a lake, where you see the waves come out, from the center out. And that's exactly how you should grow your franchise. In other words, you start here, the next one should be here, the next one should be here, the next one should be here, and then finally you get to way down yonder. Why? Because you need to monitor, you need to pay attention, you need to go there, you need to take a look at the operation, you need to make sure they're doing everything right once a month, once every 2 months, once a quarter. But the game changed. Right now, with the technology that we have, franchisors can sit in an office and with the press of a button turn on cameras in various locations and take a look. They can have Zoom calls like we're having right now. There's no reason Saeed and Hossein have to be in the same room to have this conversation. We're literally talking to each other, except we're in 2D instead of 3D. So the job gets done nowadays with technology. So because of the existence of technology, we're everywhere at any time. Right? So now the advice has changed, and the advice is, yes, if you're on the east coast of Florida and you have an interested party who wants to open a location in California, which is a 5-6 hour flight from here, doesn't matter. It's okay, because you can take a look at their stores at any given moment. You can talk to them, get on video with them. You can do whatever you want. You can look at their POS terminal, log in and see their sales on a real-time basis. You can do all of that, right? So for that reason, we say you can grow anywhere you want as quick as you want. International has a little bit of a different flavor to it, and the flavor here is there are also other cultures that you have to deal with. What I mean by culture is the following. I always use the restaurant example in franchising because everybody relates to it. If you look at McDonald's, for them to grow into Europe, they had to adopt a different culture and change their menu for that culture. So the food that you get in a McDonald's in, let's say, England, or let's say Germany, is not exactly the same food you get here. And the price you pay for it is very different there than it is here. So all of these things have to be researched and understood. You can't just take your food, whatever you're selling here in Florida, and open a location in China and expect to do well. Right? Because the cultures are different. The types of food that they like is a little bit different in that part of the world than it is in this part of the world. So some people like food more spicy. Some people in parts of the world hate food, that's spicy. So you have to understand these things before you... So that requires research. Research requires money. And franchising gives you money. I just finished telling you that with every franchise you sell, you're making about $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 up front, and then they pay you royalty on a monthly basis, right? So grow in the US, gain cash, and then utilize that cash a year, 2, 3 years down the line to conduct such research before you start exploring opening locations across the world.
I think that you mentioned some great points there, and I think what you mentioned with the differences in jurisdictions, in countries, and geographies is a really interesting point. I've been to so many countries where I've tried the McDonald's and I've been like, this is completely different. This is a brand new menu that I'm not used to. It's a really great point. And I had a conversation in our last podcast with a gentleman, Taha, and he was talking about Kareem, which is essentially Uber kind of app, but it was in Pakistan and India and that side of the world. And they would operate off of cash, right? So it wasn't digital payments. You would still operate. It was still an app. It was still everything, but people would come through and pay through cash. And it just reminded me, the culture being different has a huge effect on how you would operate. So that's a really interesting point. I think the last question I wanted to ask on franchises is really COVID-19, the pandemic, had a huge effect, and you touched on it in your last answer in terms of how we're able to operate now in talking with Zoom. COVID had a huge impact on every industry. How has it impacted franchising in general, and what lasting changes do you anticipate will happen in the future?
So that's actually a great question, a question that's come up in the past, and it's been studied heavily, right? Because every industry got hit hard during the pandemic. Pretty much every industry, except of course the healthcare and anything that had to do with healthcare, survived and did incredibly well. But if you look at the restaurant world learned a big lesson. And the whole concept of Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub, all of these concepts that have now become billion-dollar businesses were born during the pandemic, because people realized that they still want to eat, but they don't want to go to the restaurant. So they looked for these entities to deliver the food to them. And these entities were able to charge a heavy price, and people were okay to pay for it because they didn't want the risk, the liability. And they were willing to pay north of $10, $15 for a $7 burger to be delivered, right? Which is absurd to you and I today. But when you think about it, they had a chance to put that into our culture during the pandemic, and it stayed there because people were receptive to it, they got used to it, they paid for it. Once you pay for something, prices always go up, they don't come down, right? Because once people are used to paying a particular price for an item, there's no reason to lower it anymore. They're already used to paying that. So the pandemic, it created a lot of businesses like that. Now, the moment businesses got hurt heavily during the pandemic, franchises survived. And there's a reason for this. And the reason is franchises have systems. Franchises the power is in quantity here, right? So when you have a group of people that have resources that they can be put together in order to achieve a common goal, it's a lot easier than one single person who's operating a store trying to, stay alive. So because of these availability of these resources, because of the availability of cash from the franchisor, these franchise locations were able to survive and they did well. Also, people stayed home. They had a lot of time in their hands to think about their next move in their career. And they started looking at what business they want to open, and they started considering entrepreneurship and business ownership as their next step. And therefore, they landed a lot of franchises. So if you look at franchise sales during that period, it flourished. It didn't do bad. It came right back up and it did incredibly well. So franchises fared very, very well during the pandemic as opposed to a single mom and pop.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. When you see it in that direction, it's like you've got a team versus individuals almost, and the team can help each other out, whereas an individual is very much reliant on its very difficult circumstances without that support. Some really great points. So this part of the podcast, what we do is with all our guests, we like to call it the entrepreneur's room, and it's essentially a list of questions we ask all of our guests because they're entrepreneurs. We want to know how entrepreneurs think, and hearing all the different responses to these questions, it's always interesting. So the first question I'd like to ask at this stage of the podcast is, how, as a leader of your own business, are you currently spending your days?
So, as the CEO of a company, my job is to build a team. So, I'm always in the team building mode because as a CEO, you're just as good as the people that work with you. So, people give the credit always to the leader, but it's not the leader that wins the battles or wins the war. It's the soldiers. And you got to give credit always to them. So you have to have the best army before you can go into this battle, right? So I'm always in recruiting mode and evaluation mode of the people here to see if they're fit for their job, if they're fit for what they're doing. At the end of the day, I want everybody to be happy in what they're doing. I want people to wake up in the morning and be happy that they're coming to work. So I spend a lot of time on that. The other part of my days is innovation. Right? I'm gifted in the way that I have the technology side because I'm an engineer, and I have the business side. Those are two gifts that I was born with, thankfully, and thank God I have that because that's the main reason for succeeding, in life is that you have to put certain skills that you have to use, right? So innovation, bringing innovation to the business, right? I always tell people, I say, look, my strategy in businesses, when I see a fork in the road, one is a paved road and one is a dirt road, and obviously everybody's taking the paved road. I'm that guy that takes the dirt road. Okay, I'm that guy that takes the dirt road. And, so always finding out alternative methods to achieve a goal better than what everybody else is using. Talk about marketing. Everybody's going, okay, if I'm going to market my, particular product, I can do Google AdWords, I can advertise on Google, I can advertise on social media, and then, I think that's it these days, but there's a million other ways that you can achieve better results. And I'm not saying don't do those, I'm saying to complement that with other things. So that's the innovation that I spend a lot of time on.
Yeah.
And then technology, bringing technology to business so that it can make things faster and better, so that we can be better at what we do and get to the point that we want to be faster and be better than our competitors. Look, the world of business is like war. Your competition is your enemy, always your enemy, right? So if you're not doing well, you'll be shot dead in no time, right? So you have to be alert, and you always have to be innovating so that you can better your competitors, right? So those are the type of things that I mean, I can tell you, 5 or 6 other items, but those are the top things that I spend a lot of my time on to be able to make sure that I'm leading the company to where we want to be.
No, I love that answer, and that's when I ask that question, I always get a range of different answers from all the entrepreneurs. But that one was really, really great, simply because you're not just you're the top of the spear, focusing exactly on the high leverage moves that you need to make sure your head is always, it's not just above water, you're on a boat, you're comfortable, and you're constantly moving. And so that's a really interesting approach to hear, and especially the recruitment aspect of things. In terms of, I think it's Stephen Bartlett that says when you're a business owner, your number one job is to be the best recruiter in the world. Like that, your job is to recruit as many good, talented people into the business, because when you do that, then you give them the tools to be able to be around good team members and to be able to do the job. Your job then becomes just being able to handle the team and direct them in the company's vision, the values, and so on. So I think it's really interesting you said that, because someone like that, it's clearly there's a consistent theme. In terms of, as a leader, what are the most important metrics that you look at? So it might be how many sales that are coming in. It might be pipeline growth. It could be anything. But as a leader of your own business, what are the metrics you look at to ensure that the business is doing well and you can handle the competition?
And I love that question very much, and I'm glad you asked that question, because that is one of the things that I always preach to people that I consult for, right? When I tell them about, running their business, you have to have a stethoscope that the doctors have, and always listening in to different things from your business to see if the vitals are okay. Vitals are very important. The vitals of the business are incredibly important. You got to know that the business is doing well and it's set to do well 5 years from now, right? You look at a typical business owner, right? They're looking at sales. Our sales are 5% higher, 10% higher, 20% higher than last year this time. Our first quarter sales are up by 20% from first quarter sales last year. Wrong. Why wrong? Because sales and revenue doesn't pay the bills.
Yeah.
Profits do. Your sales could be up by 50%, but if your profits are down because you got more customers but you're charging less and you're losing money on each deal, how are you going to pay your rent? How are you going to pay any of the bills, right? So it's not sales that pay the bills, it's the profits. So you got to be able to know exactly what you need to look for. A typical business owner looks at their POS terminal. If it's a retail business, they press a button, they get the sales for the week or the month or whatever, and that's all it shows, because that's the only thing POS terminal can show you. Then you have your regular expenses, which is your rent, this, that, and the other. And most business owners wait till the end of the year for their accountant, actually past the end of the year, the first quarter of the next year before their taxes are due, to be able to look at the P&L, the profit and loss statement, right? That's what the accountant puts together. It's late. What he just provided to you was about 12 months ago, 9 months ago, 10 months ago. You can't go back and fix things. You need to look at your P&L in real time. You got to look at it once a week. You got to look at it once every 2 weeks. At the minimum, once every month. Understand your profits year after year, how they're looking, right? And be able to adjust that. So those are the type of things that I'm looking at. I also look at attrition. You want to look at attrition. You want to look at employees coming and going, right? A lot of employees are coming and going. You're spending a lot of time on training. And if you look, you're spending a lot of time on training. Training is expensive. Training a brand new employee, you spend a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks training a brand new employee, and the employee walks out a month later, you lost all that time. Time is money. So you want to make sure you have systems in place, like I said earlier, that provides a happy environment, a good environment, a promising environment, an environment that everybody is making money and is happy to come to work. Those are the metrics that every business owner has to look at on a daily or weekly basis in order to fine tune the business so that it can survive.
I absolutely love that answer. Just because I'm massive on metrics as well, and making sure that, yeah, I look at my P&L, I think of 2 or 3 times a week, just to make sure it's something that I'll go before bed. I'll be looking at it, just going, okay, where's my numbers? What's going on in the business? It's one of the most important things you could do as a leader of your own business, right? And so that's why I always ask that question, because it's always interesting to understand the caliber of the entrepreneur based off of that answer. So it's always interesting. In terms of then, you've been in entrepreneurship as a business owner for many, many years now, and you've done multiple exits. What have you tried before and what didn't work? What are the biggest lessons that you've learned in that time?
Okay, well, I mean, look, if you haven't failed, you won't succeed, right? So think about any professional athlete. They miss more than they make, right? Think about a basketball player. Think about any well-known basketball player of our times. They have missed more shots than they have made shots, right? It's the same thing in business. You got to fail. But think of it this way. You go to school for 4 years, 6 years, 8 years to learn a certain skills so that you can go and get a job. That 4 years or 6 years or 8 years, depending on which schools you went to, private or public, this, that, scholarship or not, perhaps cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. But you did that to learn so that when you get your job, you can succeed. When you open a business, it's the same thing. Think of it as schooling. Think of it that this is schooling. Even if it works, perfect. If it doesn't work, hey, I spent a year in school, right? That's the way I want you to look at it. You'll learn, because whatever you learn in that failure, you're going to apply to your next venture, and I promise you, you won't make that same mistake again, right? You will never, no human being is going to make the same mistake again, unless you're out of your mind or something, right? So now, if you think of every business you start as schooling, the world changes. Now all of a sudden, you're more open to starting these businesses because you're very open to going to school. And it's no different than that, right? So you're teaching yourself that schooling that is really effective and is hands-on, as opposed to some theoretical stuff that they teach you in class that 95% of it you'll never use.
I think what you just said there reminds me of a quote. Failure is a bruise, not a scar. And I think a lot of people operate off of, especially nowadays, more than ever, 95% of the population operate off of failure being a scar, right? And failure being something that is preventing them from ever making a decision, ever making the next step, ever doing anything in their life, right? Whereas if you look at it differently, it's a stepping stone, it's a learning opportunity, it's a bruise that will heal. Then the next time it happens, you know it's going to heal. You know it will get better. It's never going to be bad forever. And so then you can move forward. And I think that's a really great way to look at failure, because if you look at failure as always learning, you never fail. I think that's a really it's just a really interesting point. My last question for you, and this is a question we like to end every podcast with. It's, if you had a magic wand to solve one business problem, what would that be?
I mean, that's a great question. One business problem, if I could solve, is resources, is recruiting, right? I always tell people your number one problem in any business is the people that work for you. Look, I could be the greatest coach. Let's go to basketball again. Pick the greatest coach in basketball. The guy with the winningest record. The guy is a magician. Everywhere he's gone, he's won a championship. All right, I got him. But I give him a bunch of overweight, short people to recruit. And how is he going to win this game? He'll never win the game against not so good of a coach that has better resources with skilled, trained, taller individuals that can definitely play the game better. So finding the right people that want to work for you, you need to spend the most of your time there. That's where you need to spend majority of your time. That's the biggest problem of a business that you need to solve. No matter what your business is recruit, spend money and time in recruiting the right individuals. Those individuals, those people, imagine there is a battle to be had, there's a war to be had. And your life depends on winning this war, because if you don't shoot your enemy, the enemy is going to shoot you. Who do you want to have on your side? That's the way you have to go to this war, right? This is a life and death situation. Who are you going to go to this war with? Are you going to go to this war with these type of people with certain skills, or these type of people with no skills that are cheaper, that are easier to find? So do what you got to do. Solve the problem to be solved is the problem of recruitment. That's the way I look at it.
Hussein, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I think it's been a great listen. It's been so interesting, and you've provided some great insights. I hope the listeners and viewers have enjoyed it as much as I have. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing your time and your insights today.
Saeed, it was a pleasure, my friend, talking with you, and looking forward to our future conversations.
Appreciate it. All right then. Thanks.